and welcome to Financial Minds Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Jaime Agostino. As you know, on this podcast, we're joined by financial industry experts to talk about topics, trends, and themes that credit union professionals need to know about. This week, I'm joined by Frank Serina, Chief Risk Officer with Members First Federal Credit Union and a recent panelist at this year's Viso Financial Risk Management Conference. Today, Frank and I are going to sit down and we're going to talk about fraud. Frank, thank you so much for joining me today. Would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you, Jaime. It's an absolute pleasure to join you today. I've been in the financial institution and risk management worlds for about 38 years. I do come from an auditing background, received a solid jump start from a large bank holding company up in Northeast PA where I grew up. I brought that background down to Members First around 1990, where I oversaw their internal audit function for about 15 years. That experience really provided me a unique opportunity to understand the credit union, its processes, systems, people, really how they're all linked together. After internal audit, I was afforded opportunities within operations, to lead functions such as compliance, physical security, procurement, and contracts. And for the last 18 years, Jaime, I've led the financial crimes team responsible for our fraud and anti-money laundering efforts, and also lead the enterprise risk management, business continuity, records management, and corporate insurance areas.
Okay, wow, that's a lot.
It's fun.
All right, so scammers. They're constantly finding new ways to steal our members' money. What type of scams are you seeing, and how is the credit union helping your members combat these scams?
You know, Jaime, there's certainly no shortage of these scams, as we all know. Things seem to have exploded over the last 18 months, which I attribute to a post-COVID world where, the sources of fraud, such as PPP loans, SBA loans, no longer available. They're dried up. Other sources have been tightened, such as like unemployment compensation. The controls around that are much stronger now. So I think there's a gravitation back to some of these phishing scams and whatnot. Some of the more common scams we see include fraudsters targeting consumers by posing as people in authority. It could include law enforcement government officials, such as the IRS, and especially employees of credit unions. What's common in all of these we see is the fraudster creates a sense of urgency. Threats are also very common. We had a member who became a victim of a scam. He was told his son, who lived in Kentucky, was on his way home from a bachelor party, severely injured a woman along the road in a car accident. Fraudster posed as a law enforcement officer, had another fraudster pose as the injured woman's attorney during phone conversations with our member. They even convinced the member that he was speaking to his son by stating that his son did not sound like himself due to injuries from the car accident. They were successful in threatening a lawsuit, created urgency that the situation needed to be immediately resolved, stating the injured woman had an expiring visa, need to settle the situation quickly. And I know the situation sounds crazy. This is 100% true story. They also mentioned she was pregnant, just for an added twist. So the situation escalated when they tried to extort even more money out of our member, telling him that both the woman and her baby died as a result of the accident, inflicting fear. The elderly gentleman was told, don't mention this to anybody. Don't mention it to the employee of the bank where he was asked to withdraw cash to pay this settlement, because it could endanger the settlement and his son would remain in prison for a long time. So our credit union teller was suspicious when the member came in for a $70,000 cash withdrawal. Unfortunately, the member had already visited the bank where he withdrew $40,000 in cash, placed it in a cardboard box with packing tape, set it curbside for a courier to pick up and deliver to the fraudulent attorney. So the member was specifically instructed not to mention the content of the box to the courier who picked up the package. And I think all this, it sounds crazy, but it just shows the extent to which fraudsters recruit mules, help them carry out the crimes, and how deceptive their schemes can be. So, Jaime, I think a critical takeaway here is training and requiring front office employees to ask questions, not suggest, require them. Questions such as, is everything okay with your service? $70,000 is a lot of money to withdraw in cash. Is there something I can help you with? Is there some other way I can make this cash withdrawal for you? Perhaps I can offer you a corporate check, or a wire transfer might be more secure. So we do require our associates, our employees to ask those type of questions. And I think when asking the purpose, credit unions should have their branch employee explain to the member, because we get it all the time, this is invasive. Why are you asking me? This is my personal information. We say it may seem invasive to you, okay? And this transaction is personal, but protecting our members is our business. This is what we're trained to do. So let them know that you see members come in every day, victims of fraud, you care about helping them. Let them know your management team requires you to inquire. I always say that good safety and security must always be part of good service, right? There's more to service than friendliness and convenience. And I think from the member's perspective, educate your members to hang up. In this situation, call your relative directly at a known trusted telephone number. So, Jamie, I think people in authority are also employees for your credit union, right? Like everyone in the FI industry, we've seen significant increases in account takeover fraud. Probably the biggest type of fraud out there right now. It typically starts with the fraudster who's already obtained some information from numerous data breaches, right? Leveraging it through a phone call, text message, or email. The fraudster may pose as a credit union employee, tell your member there's an unusual charge on their account. They create fear, once again, along with some sense of urgency, with the goal of getting your member to give up some bits of sensitive information, a username, password, one-time passcode, then use that to take over the member's account. Prior to all of this, these fraudsters may recruit mules to help them quickly move the money out of the member's account. Okay? This recruitment is typically done on social media sites. Telegram is a big one and a very popular one. Reason, it's an instant messaging app, and it's popular because it does not require a phone number to use. And they have a secret chat feature. Very convenient for the criminals, right? We've also seen advertisements on Facebook, Instagram, others. These ads will directly recruit mules, okay? Advertising that they can make money with their bank or credit union account. They may even target specific financial institutions. So these mules that are a big problem right now are then asked to use their own account or possibly set up a new account, okay, which will be a flag for the purpose of receiving stolen funds from the victim member's account, right? Once they do, they'll make a quick withdrawal, take their cut, deliver the funds to the fraudster. So things to look out for. The mule may try to withdraw funds at one of your branches. They may order an ATM card, provide it to the fraudster. Then the fraudster can make withdrawals at ATM locations, drain that account a bit at a time, or possibly a debit card can be used to purchase gift cards or used for large point of sale transactions. We even saw cash advances made with debit cards at casinos. Okay? So some of these purchases are used for point of sale. They're purchasing electronics, large items, which can then be later sold for cash. So what's crazy is these mules are using their own identification and information. They consistently claim they are victims, right? They're caught up in the scam. We take a very firm approach in our investigation process and have some recent success stories proving they were not actually victims, okay? They were suspects. And we had some successful prosecution. So those cases absolutely make my day. In situations, Jamie, where a mule is not used, a fraudster is going to try to use that information to make account changes. So look out for email address changes, cell phone numbers, knowing that security alerts and passcodes will be directed there. Okay? They're doing this to gain full control and access of our members' account without raising suspicions, having everything delivered to them. So along the lines of some other scams, believe it or not, we do still see romance scams, right? We see men and women who are vulnerable, fall victim to these scams. They're desperate for attention and they're willing to pay for it. Divorcees, widows. It's especially disturbing when we see this happen to some of our elderly members. These members are typically sending money, sometimes recurring payments, sometimes overseas. So there's some flags there. Question those international wires. Question all wires. Question the purpose of the wires with your member in the callback process. The problem is that when our employees question payments sometimes, there's often like a throne of lies, okay? The member says they met the person. They haven't. There's a distant loved one may have some great cause for which they need these payments, right? They need to be helped, or possibly the loved one is in some type of trouble, okay? They're all lies. We question members hard, and repeatedly, but always respectfully. We always let them know that we're here to protect them and help look out for their financial interests. If a member will cooperate in providing us with answers or information, I should say if they don't cooperate, we will inform them we can't allow that activity to flow through our federally insured financial institution, okay? We're not comfortable with either maybe the source of funds or the destination of funds. We simply won't allow our credit union to be used as a conduit for money laundering. We explain to the member the types of fraudsters that, types of activities the fraudster may use this money for. Could be prostitution rings, drug rings, trafficking. So we try to put a little bit of fear in them, but be respectful in the process. We do give our members a chance to stop the activity, right? But if they do not, we suspend the account services. A couple other quick mentions along the lines of scams. Increasing number of IRS scams, okay, even after tax time. Ensure your members understand that the IRS will not call them to immediately demand money, nor will they threaten imprisonment to your member. It happened to me a few months ago, not the imprisonment portion, but I was threatened that I owed $6,100 in taxes. I played along with them for a while. Advanced fee scams are still around. My advice there is to caution your members to be skeptical of any unsolicited email that promises that easy money for little effort. And finally, work at home and other job scams. These are as big as ever. Tell your members it's a red flag if they're asked to open a bank or credit union account to receive or transfer money as part of that job, okay? It's a scam.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. It's crazy because, I hear about these scams all the time, but, just hearing from you who's living it each and every day and dealing with members that are going through this is just, it's crazy to hear about. So thank you for all of that. So let's talk about checking card fraud. We've been seeing an increase in checking card fraud. Do you see that too at the credit union? And what steps are you taking to help mitigate these types of fraud?
Okay, thanks, Jamie. We have seen an increase in both, okay? More so with checks. Counterfeit checks have not gone away, okay? Nor have stolen checks. There is really an epidemic of checks being stolen right now in our postal system, different points in the mail process. Some percent of that is done by postal employees. There's bags of mail being stolen every day. Postal workers being held up at gunpoint. It's just a totally different environment. It used to be taking a letter out of a mailbox, hoping there was a check or cash in there. It's just exploded. Treasury checks are targeted specifically. We've seen a lot of these, whether it's during tax time or really throughout the year. We've seen checks as much as $500,000-$600,000 that were legitimate checks, and people creating fake IDs to try to negotiate those items. The felony lane gang, other gangs are still around and active. We see highly coordinated efforts of these gangs to cash multiple counterfeit or altered and stolen checks across several branches within a very short period of time. So we've trained our employees to identify these situations based on certain red flags. First and foremost, we question everything surrounding these checks. We question our member, right? Well, strong identification, because we need to know the member. We leverage some ID tools to make sure that ID is legitimate and our employees understand the security features. We question the account history. It's also part of knowing our member. We check to see, does the member have a pattern of cashing these type of items? How new is this account, right? Are there existing flags or warning codes? We have a warning code for new accounts. We monitor for a certain time period, because it's an elevated risk. Lastly, we question the item, the check that's in front of us. We use some automated and some manual tools as well to assist in detecting counterfeits. So, training is a big part of this for the front line. Like us, many institutions have also adjusted their funds availability policy, right, due to some losses in this area. So I'd suggest to credit unions, if you haven't looked at yours recently, it may be a good way to contain some fraud in this area, depending on what you're seeing. Holes in the mobile deposit area as well may be good to revisit. possibly, looking at providing availability based on the risk, if you're able to have some sort of risk model along those lines. Look at the risk factors that surround the member and their account activity. One other thing we do, Jamie, we have some system warnings and alerts to detect these frauds. Our branches stay in close contact with each other, okay, of what they're seeing. They're trained and they're empowered to contact police. If they suspect an issue, such as being targeted by an organized crime ring, they're picking up the phone. So we empower them to do that, and they're trained in certain situations to do that. And they always go through a supervisor. We like that escalation process in a branch, even another peer, to get another perspective. One thing that's become very important at our branch is physical security. Awareness of the physical branch environment has become really important as these fraudsters drop off mules to conduct transactions. Our branch team is awesome about looking for unusual patterns and situations, patterns with vehicles parked far from the branch. They drop people off, okay? Watching for individuals instructing others who come into the branch how to perform transactions. They guide them through the process. So while some institutions have chosen, I think, to stay very silent regarding the fraud cases, we've chosen to work very closely with law enforcement, including the PA Office of Attorney General, which has led to some arrests and prosecutions, and some are in the process right now. So we're also hopeful for a bit of some recoveries as well. As far as card fraud, we've seen a fair amount of friendly fraud. So members knowingly dispute a legitimate charge as fraudulent, and this is probably the biggest thing we're seeing. Okay? This is a fraud type that you can't prevent, okay? Because any member can make a claim, a dispute, right? Mm-hmm. So we've implemented some additional monitoring and reviews of our dispute process abusers, okay? How often has Jamie submitted a dispute? So it might cause us to go back in the files and look at Jamie a little bit more thoroughly. We use a third-party processor for certain disputes, but we still obtain some data to question large dollar disputes over a certain dollar threshold, or members who I said that frequently submit claims. We'll investigate internally to determine whether our member was complicit. And as a federal credit union, we can't close accounts, but we can suspend services, and we do that action as well.
Okay. Wow. What about insider threats? Can you explain what that is and how it's impacting credit unions?
Absolutely. First off, I think when we talk about insider, Jamie, we're talking about any person who has or had authorized access or knowledge of your credit union's resources. And those resources we're talking about include personnel, facilities, information, and systems, of course. So many times people hear the word insider threat and think of malicious insiders, right? These folks are those with bad intentions, possibly misusing their privileges. They want to disrupt operations, get sensitive data out of your credit union and cause harm. Malicious insiders often include disgruntled employees or employees maybe influenced by some external adversary. In mid-2022, Yahoo experienced an insider attack where a research scientist received a job offer for a competitor called The Trade Desk. Right before leaving, he downloaded 570,000 pages of Yahoo's intellectual property. And this is source code, bidding research, strategic documents to his personal device. Yahoo didn't know for several weeks. So you think of this situation and the potential impact of these insider threats, not just financially, but on your reputation, on your credit union's reputation. So it really comes down to taking actions to ensure you maintain the trust with your members. I think it's important to remember that insider threats are not only malicious, right? But they can be classified as complacent or unintentional. A negligent insider is actually your biggest insider threat. There's reports out there that will attribute 55 to 65% of insider threats to negligence, okay? So this could include someone not logging out properly, an administrator possibly failing to change a default password or even apply a security patch properly or in a timely manner. There was a news story where a data analyst took home a hard drive with personal data on 26.5 million military veterans, okay? No bad intent, but it was later stolen in a home burglary, okay? Unintentional, but very impactful. So I can't imagine what that conversation with the individual's boss looked like. It's important to know your employees, your third-party providers, anyone who has access to your credit union's information and systems. It's an asset to criminals. I think it's really important for your HR and IT security team to talk to one another. Strong due diligence up front for new hires, monitoring employees on any watch lists. Stay aware of when someone is disgruntled, feeling maybe slighted for not getting that promotion. You have to look at these flags. It's not always a one-to-one correspondent, but it could be a big indicator for you. You don't want to miss that. And I think don't forget about the due diligence and monitoring of your third parties. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Finally, I think it's important to remember that most of these threats, again, are coming from negligence. They're unintentional, which is a reason to ensure initial and ongoing training is focused on actions that you want your employees to take to protect your information and your members' information as well.
Yeah, good points there. Thank you. We must talk about social engineering. That's a big topic, obviously, these days. Have you heard or seen an increase? What should we be concerned about in the future regarding social engineering with the advancements in generative AI and some other things?
That's a great question. We've seen a tremendous uptick in social engineering over the last year. And this is a national trend. I've spoken to small and large credit unions. We've spoken to various law enforcement agencies, NCOA regulators, risk consultants, fraud industry peers. Everyone is seeing the same thing. Consumers are being targeted with an onslaught of texts, emails, and phone calls to have the consumer divulge sensitive personal information. There's an awful lot of talk about AI in the banking world right now and proper use of it. As much as it can be used to detect fraud patterns, it can also be used to clone voices, alter images, create fake videos that may aid the fraudster, and their scams. It has really weaponized fraudsters to some extent. It's much easier for them to create phishing emails and telephone scripts that sound legitimate without grammatical errors, ones that replicate trusted sources. Just yesterday I had a security team, our security team, from our IT area do a brief presentation to our regulatory and compliance risk world and about 60 employees. And they surprised me by taking a 15-second snip of an interview I once did and leveraging it through an app to create a fake phone call. The phone call they created in a short period of time was a request to another employee for a large wire transfer, and it sounded great. It doesn't take long to do. So our credit unions collectively, our best defense in this area is going to be continuing to explore and leverage different forms and new forms of authentication. That's going to be the key. It's very difficult because as they weaponize this, it's just something that's extremely difficult to stay ahead of. Getting back to social engineering, Jamie, one of the best defenses here, one of the least expensive, is actually member awareness. You're going to hear me say this a lot already, but ensure your members know not to click on a link in email or text unless they know they're dealing with a trusted party. And if they're ever in doubt, the member should ignore the email and text. Reach out to that trusted number, Log into the trusted website. At the very least, clicking on fraudulent links is going to cause the member to be directed to a party who may trick them into providing information or sending money. At the most, it could result in malicious software on their computer, total control of their finances, among other things. We had a member not too long back who was on his desktop computer, clicked on an ad, and received a notorious Microsoft text scam. Support scam. He was informed that he had a virus. He was instructed to contact Microsoft support. He called them. They told him his account was not secure and that his credit union would call him as well. Our member hung up, received another call, and because the fraudster had his partner call the member and put fear in him. He stated there was $12,000 worth of pornography charges on the member's account. The fraudster, posing as a member's first employee, told the member that his funds were not secure. And get this, he needed to take them in cash to a federal safe locker. So I hear this story with my Bank Secrecy Act officer on a Friday afternoon, sitting in our main office lobby with the couple who's both in their 80s. They had $38,000 in their account, which was their retirement, and they took $30,000 of it, and the lady had it stuffed in her purse sitting in front of us. The couple was adamant about taking their money out of the account with us. So the teller did it, but she also guided them up the street to talk to us before they did anything with it, which was awesome. So the address of this Federal Safe Locker, a convenience store up the road. The couple was about to hand over $30,000 cash to a stranger. Okay, so although our credit union wouldn't have absorbed that loss, okay, our sole concern was again for protecting our members. So just another crazy scenario. Jaime, just a bit ago, we discussed some scams where fraudsters pose as individuals with authority, such as from banks and credit unions. Aside from the phishing attacks, we've also seen some pretext calling. So this is where the fraudster calls, acts like a legitimate member, right, in an attempt to gain additional member information. They probably already have some information from all the breaches out there, some phone number, maybe address, things of that information, maybe partial social. But then they take the information they gain in that phone call by social engineering customer service reps possibly, to another credit union employee to gain more information, okay? Until they have enough built up, then maybe they have enough now, Jaime, to make a critical account change or maybe even conduct a transaction. So to combat this effectively, you really need an enterprise call center solution, something that looks at the customer relationship, that creates transparency, really to all engagements with the member. Now, I know a lot of probably smaller credit unions don't have that, okay? But you can, leverage other communication channels such as Teams or something similar. You got to open up conversations with your peers in your customer service area. What are they seeing? You can also flag accounts, put warnings on them, put comments on them to make it visible. So that's some of the practices we do in that area. And one final thing, another practice to combat social engineering, specifically phishing, is to engage, if you can, with a third-party provider. Some of these providers can monitor for fraudsters, right, who are creating fake websites that mimic yours. Being aggressive in taking down these sites is important. It's a very strong and proactive measure. It doesn't take long for one of these sites to quickly gather login credentials and other sensitive information and money to be drained from members' accounts.
Wow. In the recent panel discussion, you spoke about the fraud lifecycle. Can you explain what that is?
Absolutely. It's a very simple concept, a very logical approach. And I think one that could be very helpful in any credit union to understand what controls you may need to put in place and where you need to put them, I should say. First, you really need to break down the fraud scenario you're looking at in steps or phases from cradle to grave. For example, if you look at an online banking account takeover scenario, it starts with a fraudster gaining personal information, right, that's used to attack the member. So how do we mitigate that? We're pretty limited in this area, but certainly strong member awareness efforts can help. Telling members to use strong passwords, never reuse them, use a password manager tool. Not much else we can do there, okay? But member education is important. So we need to realize these efforts are only going to help so much, right? Since so much of our information, as I said before, has been exposed to breaches and a sale. So a sale on the dark web, we have to accept that, right? The next phase is maybe where the fraudster attacks our member, possibly through the phishing. You may not want to hear this again, member awareness, okay? Teaching members to identify the attack, educating to avoid clicking on suspicious links that they don't expect. That is, our primary control in that area. Mm-hmm. So let's say none of that education works. We go to the next layer, and that's what this is all about, levels of security. None of the education efforts work. Fraudster gains information enough to take over the digital account, right? What's next? What's our mitigation? What comes next in lines of defense? Are our systems properly blocking and identifying suspicious login attempts? Maybe that comes next. Do they alert our members? Are they alerting us? Again, another layer. The fraudster circumvents those controls and maybe they're able to withdraw funds. What other things can we put in place? Do we have system parameters in place? Do we have reasonable transaction limits possibly, right? Are we able to view the, withdrawal transactions for velocity and monitor accounts, maybe identifying the trend in a timely manner? Maybe a little bit money gets out the door, but we catch it early enough to prevent a big loss. So this approach really just enables us to look across a fraud scenario to specific points where we can put controls and mitigation to prevent, detect, or recover from fraud. And I think the key here is to build that effective layer of controls. There's no one thing that's going to help you. So if you look at this across the process and understand that we need to balance all these controls, with the service providing, we're providing our members, you'll get there.
Okay. Well, with that controls, what controls should a credit union have in place, to fight fraud?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do at our organization, our credit union, we focus on the prevention. We've just had to gravitate towards that, and it's difficult. It's a lot of member education and awareness, and I know I spoke a lot about that. Our members are in an excellent position to prevent the fraud. They are our first line of defense. Okay, as many of you know, the regulations very much favor the consumer, which does not exactly lend any incentive for them to be proactive in protecting their accounts. Right. Again, these education efforts don't have to be expensive. We have witnessed an increase in our members detecting scams, and I tell you what, they're proud to report them to us. We've definitely seen an uptick in that, which we're excited about. So also on the prevention side, focus on educating your employees. Branches, call center, loan underwriters, right? These folks are in the trenches. Yeah. And I think it's important, Jamie, to ensure that training, it's not just an orientation. You have to keep this going throughout their employment. You have to keep it fresh. You have to keep it exciting. Little challenges, little games. It's difficult in an environment if you're experiencing high turnover in a call center or branch, but it is absolutely critical. Something else you can do that's on the preventive side, and something we've done here, examine your fraud structure. We work with our customer service team to streamline our intake process. We create a very wide funnel for our members who have fraud concerns. We had probably a few members, a few associates, I should say, employees who were handling these calls, and we leveraged what we have in our credit union. And we did a fantastic job with our customer service team, our card team. And it really allows our fraud analysts and investigators to focus on monitoring trends, detection, working with our members and law enforcement to get those recoveries. So that was a big thing. Review transaction limits. Could be daily limits, aggregate monthly limits across all products and services. Very, very important. Perhaps your credit union relaxed limits during COVID. A lot did that because branches were a lot closed for a fair amount of the time. So given the current fraud environment, you need to adjust them and continuously look at that. They're all triggers and levers you can pull. Another thing is your online banking authentication. Yeah. This is one of your biggest prevention areas. Are you alerting members of suspicious activity? Cell phone number changes, email address changes. How about card activity? Do your members understand how to respond to alerts? The importance of that. What we've seen is if our members don't understand how to respond to a card alert and hit yes or no, it's going to create a call for a customer service person. So cutting that off at the source is absolutely critical. And I go back to educating the member on that is important. So these are all controls preventive in nature. So just a couple of examples of the detection area, enterprise fraud monitoring. Perhaps you have a system, that you can leverage and you can set rules. Again, it's not necessarily preventive, but it could be detective in nature. The other thing there I think is really important is a strong incident response process for fraud. Do you have a playbook with plans to help contain fraud incidents? Do you have scripts and templates that are developed ahead of time that will assist you with member communications? So these are all things that are responsive in nature. Finally, you have controls that focus on recovery. And these are just things that, this is once the horse is out of the barn, right? Money's out the door. You're establishing payment arrangements. Maybe you're prosecuting members by working with law enforcement, using third-party collectors. These are all reactive in nature. So that's some of the things we do at our organization.
All right. You know, ransomware is also, a hot topic. It's continually evolving. What is it? Who is being impacted? And what type of losses are we seeing on a national scale?
Yeah, and this is basically where these criminals are holding credit unions and other institutions, businesses hostage for their information. Some recent statistics: 70% increase in ransomware cases, 2023 to 2022. So financial services is probably in the top 4 or 5, one of the top sectors. There's about 19 ransomware attacks every second. Okay,
Wow.
that adds up to about 1.7 million attacks per day. The average cost is a little under $2 million. And the vast majority of these are small to mid-sized businesses. And I think that's possibly, the fraudsters believe that these size businesses aren't as well defended and prepared as the larger businesses, which isn't always the case. I've seen some smaller credit unions with some real sophistication out there, which is awesome. A serious area for focus for credit unions, I think, is their third-party relationships. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. It's a huge concern of NCOA, especially after the incident last year. It was ongoing operations Trellens, I believe it was, incident late last year. Third-party risk is going to continue to be a supervisory priority. It is in 2024. It will be, I'm sure, and I know it will be in 2025, and there's a reason. NCOA fears the harm to multiple credit unions as a result of a cyber incident to one vendor. Right. Attack one vendor, impact 60 credit unions or more. So, they're trying to safeguard our assets and help us in that manner. So your credit union may be very limited with respect to how you defend, right? But many in the industry say it's not a matter of if it happens, but when it happens. So you need a strong information security program. But should your controls fail, you're going to have to rely on strong response plans, including processes and procedures to, how is your credit union going to respond to this third-party incident? One of the I think best suggestions I have in this area, Jamie, is along the lines of preparation. If you have a cyber insurance policy, check with your provider. Likely they offer the service. They could assist you. We've done several tabletop exercises related to a ransomware attack. It's an exceptional way to learn and test and improve your response. We go back, we criticize ourselves, and we improve, and it's something we've been doing every year. So it's one of the things you can do along the lines of prevention to help out.
All right. Frank, this all has just been wonderful information. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with our credit union audience today about fraud?
Yes, definitely. And holding back on this one, I want to share this. I think this is important. It may not seem like much, but it is the biggest piece of advice. Approach the mitigation of any fraud issue you're dealing with from an enterprise perspective. It sounds so simplistic, but it is so effective. Okay, we're fortunate we have a CEO who quickly recognized that although the impact is related to fraud, okay, it was a matter that required an enterprise solution. So his tone from the top, okay, and that's my old school audit language, has been instrumental in empowering us to take measures to not only contain the fraud or creating, but to start being proactive and focus on emerging trends, okay, along with the related defenses. So what we did is we formed a fraud fusion team. It's represented by financial crimes, info security, IT, customer service, branch operations, lending, and others. Training is involved in there as well. Marketing. My suggestion is do the same. Focus on cybersecurity, threat intelligence, and fraud prevention. Engage your leadership to set that tone from the top. Okay? Establish a formal team to address what's going on and what may go on in terms of fraud at your credit union.
All right. Frank, this is great. I know you provided so much valuable information today for our audience. You also did the same thing at our risk management conference, which I truly appreciate as well. So thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
I very much appreciate the opportunity, Jamie.
All right. This episode of Financial Minds Meet the Experts is brought to you by KnowBe4. The most practice and emphasis your credit union puts into security awareness, the better you'll be able to deal with social engineering threats like phishing, vishing, and cyber attacks. That's why Viso Financial has partnered with KnowBe4, an industry leader in simulated social engineering testing and security awareness training, to help your credit union and employees get the practice through their social engineering testing services. For more information about these services, please visit the additional services page on our website at www.vfccu.org. As always, thanks for listening and make it a great day.